Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is supported by Smithy Ironware. By now, if you've listened to this show, then you know how my relationship with this cast iron company has blossomed through the years. From first interviewing founder Isaac Morton to now developing recipe content for their website. My relationship cooking with cast iron in my home kitchen has grown too. Since I've been using my 12-inch Smithy skillet for a couple of years now, it seems the more I use it, the more I want to use it. And it's never hard to clean because I have one of their signature chainmail scrubbers that I can keep by the sink, pop in the dishwasher, and reuse. It's sustainable, something you know I love, and I'll also put that scrubber to work on my glass baking dishes too. As a special gift for Southern Fork listeners, Smithy's giving away a scrubber with every purchase from their site that uses the code SFORK19. Visit smithy-ironware.com, that's Smithy with an E, SMITHEY, ironware.com, to check out the growing line of skillet sizes. And remember, at the checkout, type in the code SFORK19 to get your chainmail scrubber. Now, let's go have some seafood by the Folly River, shall we? Here in South Carolina, we're a little over a week from the end of oyster season. So, come with me to experience the setting of Bowen's Island restaurant this time of year. Roll down your windows to the sound of cicadas as you pull the car off Folly Road and wind back to the edge of the water. Once you're out and climb up the steps to the second floor, suddenly, it's hard to escape that view. Marsh grass and water are set on fire in a ribbon of rose gold winding through sea breezes and the air thick with the scent of fried seafood. But you're not alone taking in the scene. You're probably with 50 or so new friends who are soon waiting in line alongside you, deciding the menu long before you're at the front to order. This is where Robert Barber and his daughter, Hope Barber McIntosh, call home, a James Beard America's Classic restaurant on the outskirts of Folly Beach, South Carolina. And they let us inside their world a bit. No shucking oysters required. All right. Welcome to the Southern Fork, you two.
Delighted to be here.
Great. Well, where here is once again my home away from home in Charleston, South Carolina. When I am here in town, Ohm Radio 96.3 is kind enough to rent space for me with the esteemed James Frolio.
Hello.
Yes, that is the great voice of James Frolio. And he is an engineer with us today. And we also have two guests who are James Beard Foundation America Classic Restaurateurs. So, yes, so the restaurant has been in existence since 1946, right?
About that time.
Yes. And what were the first things that you were serving? Obviously, you weren't serving them back then, but as a restaurant, what were the first dishes that came out of the kitchen?
Well, probably the first dishes that came out of the kitchen were fish that were caught in the river by fishermen, and my grandmother would prepare those for them. But fairly quickly transitioned into little seafood places at the end of the road. The menu was very limited or very simple. We had a fried shrimp plate, which included hush puppies and some little cut-up sweet pickles. And the variations from that went to a fish plate and then a combination of fish and shrimp, and then a seafood platter, which included a little homemade crab cake and boiled shrimp and fried chicken. And that was about it.
Well, you know what goes with all of that? Beer. And you have a beer in front of you from brewed by episode 118's Cameron Reed of Edmund's Oast Brewing Company, which happens to be next door. So I hooked us up with a beer, the most popular beer that they have, which is called Something Cold.
We have several Edmund's Oast on tap right now.
Oh, so. Excellent. Well, this is a premium blonde ale, so it is really supposed to be super light going with all this fried seafood. So cheers.
Cheers.
On a random Wednesday morning.
Do you always drink on the air?
No, just for you.
Okay.
Sometimes we do.
This would be a fancy beer compared to what was originally sold at Bowen's Island.
Oh, yes. Well, I would say you've fancied up slightly at Bowen's Island, but I wouldn't use the term fancy and Bowen's Island usually in the same sentence. So it is such a beautiful location. I think that is always the first thing I hear from people besides, oh my God, it was so cool. But that drive up. So talk a little bit about the location where you are, Hope. Because that's where you grew up.
Yeah, it's Bowen's Island is a little 13-acre island off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, and it is an absolutely beautiful spot. I mean, there's no better place to sort of work, and it's really neat at sunset to see all of the people who've come to eat there. They all kind of flock either to the edges of the deck or go out on the boat landing to try and capture, the sunset. And
so it's a hammock island, actually, right at the Folly River, correct?
I think it would be described as that since it didn't originally have any connection to the mainland.
Right. And so you just drive out there. It's a gravel drive. Get out there and you get this view of the river as it goes into around a bend and eventually will go into the harbor, the Charleston Harbor, right?
Well, if on one end it would. The river would open up into Clark Sound, which isn't too far from the Charleston Harbor. That if you go the river the other way, you would end up running into Folly Beach or come out where the marina is or come down close to where the bridge is, if you take, depending on which fork you take.
A lot of restaurants in the South, a lot of seafood restaurants all over the country, people flock to the coast to eat seafood, and then they get seafood off a truck. Really. But that's not the case at Bowen's Island. I just love the idea that when I roll up, there's a huge pile of oyster shells. So I know that they're coming directly from the Folly River. So you have a long-standing relationship with oystermen in the area, right? And fishermen.
Sure do. Certainly do.
Who were some of those people?
Well, depending on how far you go back.
How about modern era?
Okay.
Because we're on a podcast. We're all about modern.
Right. I know it's a hip place here. Originally, we had a guy named Ben Richardson Woodpick. That was back in the 50s. And then later on, Ben's son worked with him. And then some different people came in when Ben got real old. And I had quite honestly been concerned a few years back that there wouldn't be anybody to harvest oysters. It was kind of a dying activity, but I think it's been revitalized, and we've got some young fellas and some people my age that still pick oysters.
And it is, so when you say pick oysters, that's different than the aquaculture that's really rising, which is farmed oysters. So we're talking about clusters, correct?
It is, and it's my understanding that clusters are kind of unique to a portion of North Carolina and down to Georgia. I don't think you find clusters that I know of anywhere else. And it's the same species of oysters that you would find up the coast or around in the Gulf, but based on where they're growing, and how they grow, they take a different shape,
So you do offer basically a restaurant experience of the classic South Carolina oyster roast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't think Dad mentioned this at the beginning, but Bowen's Island was probably one of the first places to sort of do like the oyster roast, because I've seen like an old advertisement that we had that said, serving oysters steamed outside, and this would have been probably from the 50s or 60s.
Right. And it really, honestly, is still one of the only places doing oyster roasts. It's a difficult thing. Like when you move to South Carolina or coming here, that is such an iconic food. But it is a food that we enjoy in everybody else's backyards.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so in a way, we're eating that oyster roast in your backyard.
Like you would.
So will you explain to people outside, like even if you're from upstate South Carolina, you might not know what an oyster roast is. So
right.
How do y'all do it?
We have several different, I guess, types of experiences, and one is just in the restaurant, and our oyster room, which people sometimes call the dungeon, but
it is kind of dark down there.
It's kind of dark, but we've painted it and tried to brighten it up. But that's actually our original part of our original building was our original oyster room, and our rules in the modern era are a little bit more relaxed than my great grandmother, because she didn't care if you were the only person out of 12 who was not eating oysters. If you were not and you were not going to pay, then you did not go into the oyster room. And she made no exceptions, and she did not care who got angry with her about that. But, the experience is basically having the person who roasts the oysters sort of dump them on your table by the shovelful.
And they smell like oysters that have just been steamed. They have the scent of the pluff mud, and they're steaming right there on the table, and you got to kind of dig in and get in there, but they're pristine inside. Are you more of an oyster roast? Do you like roasted oyster? How do you like your oysters?
I like mine just sort of barely cooked, barely warmed up, but yeah, still cooked. I'm not a single person. I don't like
the selects. Yeah.
No.
You mentioned that the restaurant that was part of the original restaurant. So we should actually mention that. What year was it?
Around 46.
Right. And then when we had the fire.
No, 2006.
2006. So I was already living here. And I remember I'd gone to Bowen's Island once. And then all of a sudden we heard about the fire. And I felt like the whole city stood up and stopped work and wanted to know what is going on out there. Did you feel that way as well? Did you feel a love, like hey, help us, let us help you?
Well, I felt like an awful lot of people were very sad about it. Probably not as sad as I was, but there was a lot of, so many people had very interesting, positive experiences going out there, and you just don't know what. Hate to see it gone,
And then how did you decide to continue on after that? Because that was a pretty devastating moment. And it was a moment really, too, where development was really starting to push in Charleston for the first time.
Well, we were fortunate. We had a little structure that we were able to convert into a kitchen, so we were not out of business in a technical sense very long. And it allowed us to be a little more methodical in terms of how we were going to rebuild. Because initially we were thinking about trying to not rig the system, but work the system in a way that we could rebuild the original building.
Right.
But
because that thing had been grandfathered in. It was not up to current.
Right.
No, but we had dodged many bullets with hurricanes, and it just seemed like a rather stupid thing to do to stay on the ground at that point. But we took a long time and decide, like about
4 years.
Well, to rebuild. It took us probably 6 or 8 months to decide we can't build the old building back as it was, but we did preserve the original. The original building was the old dining room, and in the dining room had been made out of cinder blocks, not concrete blocks.
Right.
And the cinder blocks were able to withstand the heat, so they didn't just crumble like the concrete block did.
Wow.
And so we tied those together with with rods, kind of like earthquake rods. And so we still use that room, but we went up a floor, and it turned out to be a wonderful thing in terms of being able to really appreciate everything around you. The little building just didn't give you much opportunity to appreciate.
Right. And you've got this beautiful decking now where people can enjoy. And I've seen a lot of rehearsal dinners and parties and weddings and, birthday parties. I've been to my share out there as well. I've been to a couple events out there, and there is just something that's really special about having that elevated space. So how do you feel now, since it's been, more than a decade? You still miss the old building?
I miss the old building in a lot of ways, but again, it ended up being sort of a blessing in disguise. I mean, if I had to do it again, I'd want the old building, but the way it's worked out, I'm happy with it.
Right. Now, Hope, you joined the family business here.
I did.
There was a moment probably where you're like, am I going to do this? Like, talk about that.
That still happens.
Yeah.
Every day.
It does. There are
She's
some
like,
days I would say, I want to quit.
Yeah, she was talking about your voice texting. It probably is when she receives a voice text from you.
Yeah.
She didn't get a voice text from me.
You did. It said,
Accidentally.
Hope, I am dictating a voice text to you.
Oh, that's the only one I ever
And then
did.
she's like, maybe I should rethink my job here.
No, but the restaurant is something that sort of part-time, at least, when I was teaching school and raising my children, that I was definitely involved in on the weekends and in the summertime and things like that. But once both of my children were sort of off at school, seemed like a good time to kind of move into the job. So I started off basically doing a lot of the paperwork and the marketing and special events coordinating, and then about 8 months ago took on sort of more of the day-to-day operations of it. So,
and day-to-day operations is no small feat because it's PACO'd all the time. Yeah. So about how many people do you serve a day? Do you have an estimate
I want to say,
on that?
I don't know, an estimate of, I can tell you ticket numbers.
Depends on the season, of course.
Yeah.
Right. How many ticket numbers then? Like how many tables you're saying?
Maybe 200 on up.
Yeah. 200 of at least one or two people at each place. Yeah. So that's a lot of people. And you have a counter service. You have a line.
Right. That is correct.
So how does that work? I mean, they basically have to know this is an evening experience. We're not going to come in and rock and roll and get in and out in an hour. But what kind of things do you do when they're in line?
When they're in line, well, a lot of times they can come up to the bar and get a drink, and but it's very interesting to kind of see people who have made it through the line together and they've chatted it up and had good time talking to people. And
so it's a great way if everybody relaxes just to kind of hang out and
make new friends.
Make new friends, have a happy hour while you're waiting on your table.
Right.
I kind of planted that question.
Yeah.
Hope and I chatted about this counter service for an article that I wrote last year for Skift Tables. So I was like, how does somebody who handles a line all the time handle it? So, but when you've come into this business and you're having to work with family, there wasn't a Instagram account. There wasn't a Twitter account. There wasn't, what have you brought to the table? What are some interesting things that are new in that world, for the next generation?
Sort of expanding social media, doing a little bit more with our website and sort of merchandise and that kind of thing. And playing with the idea of doing some maybe steamed crabs this summer.
Blue crabs.
Blue crabs.
Oh, yeah. Do you have guys that'll go out and pick for those too? Yeah, that's really, really cool. So. Yeah, no softies though. Yeah. You're not going on the softie train?
Probably not. I mean,
it's just gotten kind of crazy. Do I need to have 55 different softie variations? I guess I do.
We actually used, a long time ago, I remember Grandmama used to cook the soft shell crabs.
But we did. We used to have a guy from Virginia that rented a spot, and he processed the crabs. So any time that they would be missing a claw or missing a couple of legs,
we had the misfit crabs.
He would give them to my
They were already
grandmother.
sad. They were like, we're sad.
They
Go
tasted
ahead.
the same. Tasted the same.
Right.
So you've added the new things, and you're talking about, Edmonds Oast beer on tap. So you're
Right.
really trying to connect to the local community beyond just being, standard tourists, keeping that same thing.
Right.
And I think that's what's really interesting about Bowen's is that it's not just a tourist location.
Right.
There is a heart of Charleston there, and there are times like when I have people in town that I want to show this is cool. Like I might not get out there as often as I need to by myself, but when I have people in town, it's like great excuse to come. Do you see that a lot?
I think so. I hear that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Now, she's coming to the business, growing into it. You've been in it for a long time. What's your favorite aspect of it?
Well, let me mention one thing before I
Go
address
for it.
that. Hope came and did a very good job. We have our original cocktail sauce recipe that my grandmother and the cook had come up with, and my grandmother and I for a year or so we got a permit to make and process it, but we would do it in the kitchen by ourselves, which was quite a task. But
And to get a permit is a task.
it's
This was back in the day. This was long.
a lot of bureaucracy.
A
But
lot of bureaucracy.
anyway, Hope got our cocktail sauce bottle, so you can buy that by the bottle
Yeah.
now.
Excellent.
What-
Congratulations
what's
there,
that?
Hope.
Thank you very much.
I would not have had the patience to do for sure. But now tell me, what was that question again? What was a
that's
good
fine.
part of it?
Let's
Your
chat
favorite part.
about the cocktail sauce. Obviously it's a secret recipe, so we're not going to go into it. But why was that important for you, Hope?
That has been something that we had talked about ever since, back in the day. And I think that was about the time that Mom came up kind of with the logo too, didn't she? Kind of designed the logo that we have now. My mom designed to go on the cocktail bottles, but
Did that about 35 years ago.
yeah. But
So
I
you're
think
like,
that-
I'm going to check this off the to-do list.
Yes, yeah. And I think, with the increase in sort of local products, and you see like a ton of hot sauces out there, but really there are not a whole bunch
That's
of
a good
cocktail
point.
sauces.
Yeah, that's very, very good point.
And so one of my favorite places that sells our cocktail sauce is Burt's Market, out on
Oh,
Folly.
yeah.
So, and ours is a little bit unique. Some people complain, it's too watery, but if you have really good seafood, then you don't need too much cocktail sauce.
Right. And Burt's Market is it's a culture moment. Everyone, if you're around Folly, go in there.
Yes.
They have guitar strings for your acoustic guitar playing needs right next to local cocktail sauce.
Right.
Right.
Nice sandwiches that they make. I'm just always, I love to see the weird combinations.
They have
of
some
things
crazy
in there.
stuff.
Yeah, we got it in Burt's now, and we got it in Harris Teeter now, and someplace else. But anyway, happy to see that happen. And
So my question was, you've been in it for a while. So what's your favorite aspect of this work? What, besides just the family, just because you're doing it, what do you like about it?
well, it's very gratifying to have an institution that's been around a long time and that people appreciate. And it's very nice to have a business that's very much engaged in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very nice to serve good food that people appreciate.
Mm-hmm. And you really think about sustainability as being much more than just like recycling or something. You're really thinking about sustaining family members that you've worked with since the 50s in some ways, these oyster pickers and stuff, right?
That's very important. I mean, the local oysters, you couldn't enjoy them if there were not people willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And with the local oysters, they're basically hand picked, unlike say Gulf oysters where you have mechanical means of dredging the oysters up. If you weren't willing to get out in the boat and get up the mud to your knees,
And they use like a pick. I mean, they use like a little axe, right?
Well, they use a little hammer or
Right.
a lead pipe or something, because when you're harvesting oysters, you want to cull them. There's a certain size you want, and if there's smaller ones on there that you can knock off, you want to do that. If they're dead shells that you can knock off, you leave them right down the bank because that is a substrate for the next season of oysters.
And that small
on.
oyster can grow big by the next time. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they can reattach for sure.
Right.
So when people bring oysters, how does that, will you kind of give us a scene? Do they have John boats? Can you just tell us how it typically works?
Well, the boats vary from relatively small to a good bit bigger, but none of them are real big. They are, of course, flat bottom boats because you're going back in oftentimes narrow, somewhat shallow creeks. You're going out there in between low tide, and there's just a little window there because you've got to be able to get your boat in and get your boat out. If it's dead low tide, you can't get your boat out. So you got to do it. And
you can get to the oysters, but then you can't take the oysters out.
But it's got to be low enough so you can access the oysters.
Right.
But it's a very challenging job. So guys go out, I don't know, 30 minutes before they know they can get to the oysters, and hopefully they pick as carefully as they can because you don't want to be buying junk. Oftentimes you go to buy.
Because you're buying by weight.
Well, we buy them by volume, but occasionally we have to rely on oysters from another source, and invariably, I would say probably.
We're very spoiled with the people who pick oysters for us. They do an awesome job.
You can buy oysters and you think you got a gold mine because the bag is so heavy, and you come to find out there's a lot of dead shell in there, and they're real muddy and just.
And that's not sustainable either because you're losing food costs on your side.
Sure, absolutely. But our guys will go out, and we have we call it a pad, a concrete pad. Mm-hmm. And they pull the boat up to the pad and empty the oysters onto the pad. And we have which is one reason ours are real clean, is that we have a pump, and it pumps water out of the river. Mm-hmm. And it's like a small fire hose. And so it really does get as much mud off the oysters almost you possibly can.
Because you don't want cooked pluff mud.
No.
It's okay to have that creek scent, but there's nothing appetizing about mud that's been steamed.
Well,
no.
But the guy, I used to have a guy that cooked oysters for us too, and I sometimes wondered. He goes out in his boat, he picks them, he puts them in his boat, he brings his boat back, he puts them on the boat trailer, he pulls it up to the pad, he takes the oysters out of the boat, he washes them, he puts them in a bag. He puts them back in his boat. He dives over and puts them in the cooler. Well, this guy, beyond that, he would then walk into the cooler, take the oysters out, cook the oysters, and serve them. To me, that's an exhausting cycle,
That is an exhausting cycle. But when the oysters come out, they just get dumped on the table. But you do have the trays, right?
Right, that's correct.
So that's another way that people can enjoy it.
Trays
that's a
and
new
buckets.
way. We used to not do it. The only way we used to do it was all you can eat. But now we do them all you can eat, or by the tray or by the bucket.
And that's because you go in the oyster room, you better be eating oysters.
Right. That's right. Well, the other thing is people, serious oyster eaters love the idea of all you can eat. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, you can almost lose money on them, honestly.
Right. Because they sit down and they're serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Y'all know about the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition, right? And every year they have that oyster roast in the bus shed downtown.
Right.
You will see people that probably have ranches in, Montana that, are 1,500 acres, and they are elbowing, trying to get to the front of that table because they're going to settle in. So, yeah, for sure.
But the buckets and the trays certainly offer people who aren't as experienced or familiar with the way we do our oysters, a little taste, I guess.
And for most people, a tray of oysters is all they need, really.
Right. And if you're bringing a group or a family, get a tray. Everybody has a little bit. It's almost like an appetizer, and then you can have a variety of different food. Mm-hmm. So what is next for Bowen's? You've got it kind of organized. You've got this next thing. You've got the cocktail sauce. What are you thinking?
Hope mentioned about the crabs. Nobody that I know of around just does blue crabs, and we've got a space where we can do that. I mean, you wouldn't want to do.
I don't want to clean up blue crabs from upstairs.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You would have to, we got a screen porch where you could do that, and we could just wash the floor down with a hose.
Yeah.
You don't want crabs smell worse than oysters, So,
That's true. And picking crabs is a messy business. And I love the idea of garlic crabs. They're just such a local specialty, but you got to be ready for that moment on a Friday night. You can't have enough wet naps to handle that. Not enough wet naps.
And it's an exhaustive. I mean, people are very. We have had a lot of interest in doing that, and that's kind of why I think it would be a good complement to what we do now. And when it's not oyster season, but
it takes cooking your own, getting your own food to a new level. It's like way beyond fondue.
Crabs are so much harder than oysters or anything else like that.
Yes, but people love that. So, and they are very much a specialty of the place. So,
but those are something you'd need. You couldn't do all you can eat. We would not do all you can eat crabs because most people don't know how to pick a crab, and there'd be so much waste it would be ridiculous. So you'd sell them by the dozen or half dozen. I mean, people in Maryland and Virginia, D.C., all the way up to New York, they really have a genuine, respectable appreciation for crabs. Down here, I think one reason I think they would go pretty well is because of tourists. Local people, they remember, catching crabs on Folly Beach, and they think they're a dime a dozen. Crabs are expensive, and people
also, too, I've caught them and have to pick them. And you do that a few times.
Right. But people up there, they realize what they're worth. And but they got a great crab tradition, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, they definitely do. Well, in this area, definitely, I would say is shrimp and oysters. Although you definitely sell fish too, but it's a shrimp and oyster region. And I knew, obviously, Shem Creek and the shrimp before moving here, but that idea of oysters was very specific to this place. And I think, you go down to Florida, which still has, Jacksonville, you don't have that love for oysters and the oyster roast that you do here in the Low Country.
Right. They eat them on the half shell. I don't know if they do. Do they do oyster roast down there much?
No, I mean, it's still considered the Low Country all the way through Amelia Island, but so you'll see it sometimes, but I think the epicenter really is the Charleston area.
Definitely. And it's Dad is real good with groups that come in, and we had some people from Wine and Food, and you can tell that you can watch them be real apprehensive about what exactly to do with that cluster of oysters that sits in front of them.
Yeah, because how do you get in there? You know, how do you attack it?
You kind of have to go around and give some instruction and direction, but those folks, even though they didn't seem to necessarily jump right into it like a local would, really enjoyed that experience.
They got into it a little bit.
Yeah, they get into it. Well, that leads us to our questions. So I'm hungry right now, so I want to know, what are you hungry for?
Are these pass fail?
These are pass fail, and there will be a written part of the exam as well. It'll be off the air.
Dad likes school, so.
I still have nightmares about school. Go ahead.
I used to teach, and I taught college, and I still have an occasional nightmare that I can't find my classroom.
Ooh, yeah.
Or that I signed it up and said I would teach a class and never showed up the entire semester, but they were there the whole time. It is.
Oh, man, it's rough, isn't it?
It's rough. Why doesn't that go away? That's been close to 20 years.
Yeah.
Why is that happening to me? But I had one recently where I was on a golf cart on some winding campus and couldn't find my classroom.
Couldn't find where you were supposed to be. That's a terrible
And I'm
thing.
the instructor. Yeah. So it doesn't get any better.
No, man. I know what you're talking about.
So what makes you hungry? That's the first question. You can answer that however you want, specifically, theoretically.
What makes me hungry? When I smell something that smells real good. I don't. And cycles are things that come to my mind that I want to eat at a particular time, but I think it's more of the.
So right now, as we're going into spring, as we're in spring, What is really like, you're like, yeah, I'm ready to eat that?
Well, this time of the, not quite this time of the year, but one of the things that I love, my favorite thing in the summer are tomatoes and cucumbers.
Oh, yeah. Together with vinegar and onions?
That's great together.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
He's a tomato snob.
Yeah, we eat tomatoes for breakfast and lunch and dinner, and
Do you grow them or buy them?
I buy them.
What kind do you look for? What's the holy grail tomato?
Well, in my mind, a lot of people on John's Island from the old days would cuss me and disagree, but I love tomatoes out of the Midlands, Newberry County and Lexington County.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great tomatoes up there.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a particular variety that you look for?
I don't, but I just don't pay enough attention to that.
But you know it when you see it.
Oh,
You're
right.
like, yep, that has some nice shoulders on it. That's going to be a good slicing tomato, right?
Sort of.
What about you, Hope?
Well, mine kind of ties into what Dad was saying. Like there are certain seasons, and as a child, I always came to South Carolina to stay with my grandparents over in the summer, and my maternal grandmother was she was from the Midlands, and she always had a garden, and so whatever you ate on her table was like butter beans that you had shelled, or corn that you had shucked, and she would pickle and can and put stuff away. But I guess fresh and simple. And then my dad's mom, who is still alive, I used to come down to Folly Beach with her, and she would take me out in the fields on James Island, where a lot of people live in houses now, but that were tomato
They
fields.
were
And
fields.
If you can think of anything hotter than like being out in a tomato field
Yeah.
in like July. But that and we had a beach house out at Folly, and would do frogmore stew, like just newspapers on the table, and it all kind of got dumped out. So that and the corn, and like Dad said, catching crabs off of Folly Beach. So for me, it's more sort of times of year and what's kind of associated with that time of year.
That is me too. I want it to be hot.
Yeah.
I'm ready for this weather to,
I like hot
get
weather.
warm. Yeah, me too. I think it divides the tourists from the rest.
Right.
But it's a
Like if you're walking the Battery at noon with your family in July, we can't help you.
Yep. And we have a lot of people.
We're not doing that.
Yeah. A lot of
It's
people
too
who
hot.
complain about Bowen's Island being too hot in the summer, but
we're probably the only restaurant around that doesn't have any air conditioning in it.
our kitchen just got a
We-
central AC.
we
in
did
it.
put-
They're very happy.
Well,
AC in the
you
kitchen.
started with the important people.
Right.
I mean, there's something. Yeah, picking crap. The summer
fryers,
coming out.
the fryers
to pick
get
up.
to be
Yeah.
under the hood. It's
Yes,
warm.
definitely. So, what's one aspect of each of your jobs that really says something about your personality? You feel like you're particularly suited for?
I don't know. The one thing I guess I'm not addressing your question directly, but a thing I love about the restaurant business is you do have the opportunity to meet a lot of people, and it's wonderful to hear good feedback for people's experience.
Dad likes to walk the parking lot and talk to people
Yeah.
after they've been in.
Yeah, I talk to them after they've been there,
Yeah.
just to kind of get a blind.
And they're like,
opinion.
why is this guy approaching
Yeah,
our car?
right.
What is going on?
Sort of, but
I would have answered what you said, which is that you like to talk to people and meet people.
yeah, I like to talk to people, and of course you got to make money. You can't have that opportunity, but
You like sharing that table.
yeah, I do. Sure do.
And he does a lot with the private events, and I think he enjoys that sort of more one-on-one connection with them, and that's kind of a neat thing to be part of.
Yeah, really,
celebration.
that's a slightly different, but it's a good experience to be engaged with a group or a family or somebody on a special occasion,
And to really, you're sharing more than just the food. You're sharing your culture. You're showing them how to pop those oysters,
Sometimes.
right?
sometimes you have to do that.
I would say for me, it's the ability to kind of multitask or to kind of switch things up, because it's never one night is never the same as another, and every day produces sort of new challenges that you have to work around or work with. So I would say that's kind of
You
what
like
works.
the heat in that kitchen.
I do like to eat in the kitchen, I guess. Yes. So that and the fact that I think I kind of have like two speeds. Either I'm sort of on high speed or no speed. But
You're sleeping or
yes,
on high
or
speed.
awake. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's me as well.
Yeah.
Honestly, people are like, you should relax. I'm like, well, I sleep.
Yes, exactly. So I'm either walking around pretty quickly or
Done.
laying down.
Yeah. So what keeps you up at night?
Oh gosh, that's a challenging.
That's
question.
a whole podcast.
You can just pick one.
Yeah.
If you got multiples.
I get multiples.
I got multiples too.
What keeps you up at night? If you drink too much, you don't sleep well.
That's true.
Uh,
You do like a margarita occasionally, I've heard.
I've had a margarita too. If you smoke cigars or smoke too much for you during the day, you're all wired up.
Mm-hmm.
I lose sleep sometimes when I think about something that I've done that was real stupid that I wish I could redo.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes lose sleep over hurting somebody's feelings that I regret having done that.
Mm-hmm.
You can lose sleep over being sounding real highfalutin, or like I know what I'm talking about, that existential angst that we all experience. That,
Yes.
where we want to know our place in the order of things and
Yes.
are concerned about our Creator or where we sit with those types of spiritual, religious things. So a lot of reasons you can lose sleep at night.
Oh, yes.
He went way deeper than I did, but I don't know. Besides sort of the day-to-day, like what I didn't get done and what I have to get done tomorrow, probably coming into the business now and is sort of looking back at sort of the traditions and legacies that I have been fortunate enough to come into, and moving forward, how to best honor those and preserve those while still sort of evolving and moving forward as a business and sort of as an institution. Like how do you do that? How do you?
That's a delicate dance, you know? It really is. And also, if you don't, though, then you lose, and eventually will lose that business because life just always is moving.
Yes.
So, yeah, I've all of these things, every one of these things.
Right.
I've got on makeup today for a reason. And finally, I'm going to maybe have to cook you a death row meal at some point if you, lose it and commit some kind of crime. But either way, I mean, what is that meal, that one meal that you, like, I have one meal left to savor. What is it?
If I'm going to pick my last meal, I would say a really good rare steak.
Rare? Medium rare? Oh, yeah.
Rare.
Mooing.
Yeah.
Slightly mooing.
Slightly mooing.
Do you have a favorite cut?
I'm more of a ribeye person.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
That, probably some Bowen's Island oysters, for sure. And then hand-shaved noodles. If you've never had hand-shaved noodles, you can't get them anywhere like down here. I've had them in Chinatown in Philadelphia and actually in Beijing, China. But I think it's quite labor-intensive, but they're amazing.
Great. Love it. That's a very balanced meal there, Hope. I would go with all
Very
carbs.
few veggies.
It's not a shocker.
Right.
What about for you?
You can have a lot of work to do for me. I want to do a buffet.
You want a buffet? You want an all-you-can-eat buffet? Just keep it going?
Not necessarily all you can eat. Yeah. And I'm going to forget something in there, but I would like to have some of my mother's biscuits. I'd like to have some of my now deceased mother-in-law's fried chicken, and I'm not a big fried chicken eater, but I don't like to use the calories for that. But I would do that because it's mighty good. I would have.
You don't need to worry about the calories, remember?
It's your last meal. There you go.
Who was it? My grandmother, you won't be able to do this because we don't have the recipe, but she made a wonderful little crab cake. It was short on crab meat, but it just tasted wonderful to me.
It was like the inside of a devil crab?
It was more like a devil crab.
Yeah.
It wasn't in a shell, but it was like a devil crab.
That was one of my favorite foods growing up. I could recreate that. I'd work hard at it.
I'd have some fresh Newberry County tomatoes and cucumbers. I love talking about Maryland a minute ago. My favorite crab cake is a Maryland crab cake, a lump crab cake. I wouldn't want a big one, but a small crab cake.
If you're special, you get one of those. Yeah, but they are really good.
And probably have a little bit of a good hot vinegar PD barbecue.
Nice. Nice. Pulled pork. That sounds good.
And I'm forgetting something, but certainly I would
margarita.
I'd want a margarita, and I would have some oysters and just a couple of fried shrimp.
Nice. Well, I'll get right on that.
Right?
I got to start cooking now.
You better get off. You better get moving.
I better get moving. If people want to learn more about Bowen's Island Restaurant and the beautiful Bowen's Island, South Carolina, you can go to thesouthernfork.com so you can check it out. If you do come to Charleston, any time of year is a great time to visit Bowen's Island. Fried shrimp, crab coming soon in the summer, nice oysters in the winter. Nothing better than walking the beach on a brisk winter day and then go into Bowen's Island and warm it up with some fresh roasted oysters. So if you like what you hear, there are close to 140 interviews of Southern culinary makers from all around the country. Delve into wherever you listen to your streaming audio and search for the Southern Fork, and you'll be able to find lots of interviews from Charleston and beyond. So thank you so much for both coming today.
Enjoyed being here.
I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. While I was editing that interview that you just heard and was really thinking about how cool it was that I got to capture Robert Barber's very distinctive accent. And in case you're interested in accents like me, you might want to delve in some afternoon or evening when you know you're surfing the web looking for, I don't know, BuzzFeed clips or something. You could instead go down the rabbit hole of the Library of Congress. This is something that I have loved for years, aka nerd alert. But the Library of Congress has so many things online, and they actually have a lot of audio online. And that's really where I first got into the idea of recording interviews. Before I even listened to NPR or anything, I listened a lot more to the Work Progress Administration interviews that they conducted in the South in the 1930s. Remember that nerd alert? Yep. I mentioned this on the GSD Entrepreneur podcast a while back, but the Work Progress Administration interviews really they went all through the South, but it was a lot of oral history. So those things and many, many more are in the Library of Congress. All you have to do is search, like Google search. You don't even have to go to the Library of Congress website if you don't want to, but you can just you can type Low Country accent into Google and hear recording, probably from the Library of Congress. So if you are feeling that you're tired of kitty cat memes and you'd like to learn a little bit more about accents or just hear some voices of the South before you were here, check that out. Until then, you know where I'll be doing nerd alert things, probably. So anyway. You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you gonna eat all that?